song? Where does it take you? What does it stir up? Imagine the place that song takes you to, the scenery surrounding you, who you're with, what you look like. It's something that's almost unforgettable. It's so easy to picture how old you were when you first listened to it, what the song made you feel, what the day looked like. Maybe it was sunny and warm. But wait, I could have sworn the day looked different. It was snowy, cold, almost like a blizzard. Was I with anyone when I was listening to it? Was I even outside? What song am I even thinking of? According to the World Health Organization, there were over 57 million people diagnosed with dementia in 2021. Dementia, a sort of blanket term for a handful of diseases that cause deterioration of cognitive function, including Alzheimer's disease. Dementia is a terrifying concept. The idea of forgetting everything while starting slow, rapidly, until you don't even remember who you are anymore. Your life, your accomplishments, your family, all seeping out of your brain against your will. Admittedly, it's very difficult to imagine. How could someone forget the people they cherished the most, and the memories they made with them? The difficulty that comes with understanding dementia is oftentimes what makes it so hard to care for family members that are diagnosed with it. It's these reasons that, musically, an artist by the name of Leland James Kirby, under the pseudonym The Caretaker, created the very famous 6-part project, Everywhere at the End of Time. An album that gives us the feeling of slowly but surely failing to remember the music that was so important to us in our memory as a whole. Now, I'll be the first to admit, this album has been covered quite a lot on YouTube, which may make it seem like this video is redundant. But the way I see it, I want to see if this album has stood its greatest test, the one it tries to make us feel like we're losing. Time. The project started back in 2016 and ended in 2019, so there are some songs that have been around for almost 10 years. I want to come to this album with that question. Has it stood the test of time? That being the case, the video is going to be structured as follows. The first chapter will be a breakdown of the 6 sections, how the project itself was made, along with my own post-listening thoughts. The second chapter will be how I think the album holds up in the modern day, almost 10 years after its release. And the third chapter will be my own personal feelings and how this album has affected me and the way I see my own family members. I also need to mention that if you've seen my content before, and even if you haven't, things are going to be structured a little bit differently in this video. Even reading through a script, which I rarely do, this video is already really different from how I usually do things here. The contents and ideas of this album are very serious and hold a lot of weight. Weight that I want to make sure I do justice. With that being said, this video may contain themes that viewers find disturbing or unsettling, and so because of that, viewer discretion is advised. Now, without further ado, my name's Henry. I love music. I hope you enjoy my little impromptu recording studio setup I got here. And happy Halloween from The Caretaker. Let's go. I think what other videos covering this album fail to do is give a good background on its creator and how he made the project. So I want to take some time to introduce you to him. Born in 1974, Leland James Kirby had always been interested in the creation of ambient music. The name he released his projects under, The Caretaker, as well as one of the initial driving forces that led to its creation, was inspired by the 1980 movie The Shining, specifically the haunted ballroom scene. This fascination with the grandiose swing jazz of the early 1900s and his interest in the gradual deterioration of human memory is what led him to start The Caretaker. Before the album we're going to discuss, Kirby released 7 projects through different labels, different physical and digital mediums, and varying success. But it seemed like these projects were just practice, or simply testing the waters, for a much bigger and ambitious project Kirby had on the horizon. A 6 LP long series called Everywhere at the End of Time, the magnum opus of The Caretaker. This project would explore the deterioration of the mind of a dementia patient as the project progressed. This would be done by sampling a number of different songs from the early 1900s and digitally applying effects like distortion and reverb to them. These samples would also slowly boil down to just their main elements and choruses as the album progressed, leaving out forgotten details. I'll get more into this as I talk about each section. In an interview done with the Quietus, Kirby said, My final idea has been to give the whole project Dementia. Originally, I was going to make one recording and take it down into the abyss over a period of 3 years. So the idea would have been to do one recording and degrade it, to process it down so you would get a continuation from the start to the end point. But then I thought, wouldn't it be better to give the whole project Dementia? The interview took place after the release of the first album, but set the scene for what we would see throughout. Here we experience the first signs of memory loss. The stage is most like a beautiful daydream, the glory of old age and recollection, the last of the great days. We begin stage 1 with a grand ballroom-style swing song, one that's main chorus has become almost infamous on the internet. Heartaches by Sid Phillips and his Melodians, Al Boley, and the Three Jinks houses a main melody we hear throughout the entire album, one that is introduced to us in this section as something that we will need to remember. The instruments are loud and tangible, almost like you can remember the exact moment it was being played. As we progress through this stage, we get some quieter tracks that give the feeling of listening to a record at home, another memory someone might see as fond. The songs are fully tangible and understandable, but there is noticeable grain as if someone is replaying these songs. There are also times where it seems that the songs loop over main parts, or cut back to their earlier parts. The stage's description really does it justice. The album feels like one big daydream. In my own personal notes, I wrote that this was the most enjoyable part of the project for me, emotion-wise. I've always been a big fan of early 1900s jazz, and the album played a big part in that when I first listened to it. I had wrote down that I wasn't feeling anything crazy, but that I was anticipating what's to come. And I feel like this was how the section was intended to make you feel. These are the last moments before you realize something is wrong, before you realize some things are starting to slip. And so thematically it makes sense that this part of the project would have the most enjoyable reaction. And trust me, it does a really good job of conveying how scary this really is. The second stage is self-realization and awareness that something is wrong with a refusal to accept that. More effort is made to remember so memories can be more long-form, with a little more deterioration in quality. The overall personal mood is generally lower than the first stage, and at a point before confusion starts to set in. Stage 2, while only being a slight step down in quality from stage 1, has a notable shift in mood, and I noticed this in a few ways. For one, the songs are much more mellow, less grandiose like the ones from the first. The album conveys this really well right at the start by sampling the same song, Heartaches, from stage 1, but choosing a much more slowed down and mellow version. It seems like the false joy that infected the daydream of the first section has been washed away with the stage's self-described self-realization. We now know that something's wrong, and it's taking us out of the bliss. Secondly, the songs are a tiny bit longer on average compared to the ones from stage 1, consistently hitting around 4 minutes in length. Again, like the description mentioned, a more intentional effort is being made to remember more important things, causing the songs to draw out a little longer. The last thing, and the thing that stuck out to me the most, is that the songs feel contaminated. Rather than only hearing the grain of the record playing as we remember the song, other sounds can be heard infiltrating these memories. Footsteps, bird chirps, things that definitely aren't supposed to be there. It starts to feel frustrating almost. Things are interrupting the parts of songs we want to remember the most, making us forget the best parts. It's proving to be only a matter of time before the denial starts to turn into confusion. In my own personal notes, I pointed out the difference in stage 1 and 2's slow songs. Where the first stage's slow songs felt like a fond memory of listening to a song beside a turntable, the ones from stage 2 felt much more like an intentional slowing down of time, a real effort to remember something that, while you haven't forgotten yet, you're already scared of losing. Here we are presented with some of the last coherent memories before confusion fully rolls in, and the gray mists form and fade away. Finest moments have been remembered. The musical flow in places is more confused and tangled. As we progress, some singular memories become more disturbed, isolated, broken, and distant. These are the last embers of awareness before we enter the post-awareness stage. Before we talk about this section's contents, I want to take some time to mention the track names throughout this project. They all follow the themes of the stages, with 1 being joyful, 2 being confrontational and a bit standoffish, and the section we're about to discuss, 3, being almost confusing. The titles in this section seem poetic, but in almost a somber way. While it might be somewhat obvious to say, the stage does shift in tones from the previous two. We're far beyond the point of any kind of blissful ignorance or standoffish determination to remember anything. The songs feel distant and are filled with much more echo. They no longer feel intentionally slowed down as a way to try to preserve the memories. They return to normal speed, but even at this speed and a longer length, it's clear the songs aren't right. The only parts we can remember are the main melodies, and they're getting repeated over and over again. These melodies are also some of the same ones we heard earlier on the album. Again, the Heartaches melody can be found pretty easily. But another song we find repeating is Good Night My Beautiful by Russ Morgan and his orchestra. This song's main melody is found all over this section and is repeating over and over and over again, potentially signifying the very memories we experienced just a few stages earlier are already changing. Sure, they're different renditions of the same song, but there is a noticeable difference in how they're being portrayed. Another important thing to note is that the transitions from song to song during this section are much more abrupt than it was earlier. In stages 1 and 2, a majority of the songs faded out or peacefully transitioned into each other. Now the songs make a hard cut, as if we're remembering things somewhat out of order and in some cases, not remembering anything at all. This makes for a very unsettling listening experience if you're not eyeing the amount of time left on the song, which, speaking of, the lengths of the songs are also very inconsistent. Some songs hit the 4-minute mark while some don't even make it to a minute and a half. The memories we're experiencing are slipping, fading, and changing right before our ears. This section shows that while we're not quite done yet, we're becoming aware that we've forgotten some things no matter how hard we're trying to remember. In my own personal notes, I wrote about how caught off guard I was by some of these abrupt transitions, but that I had realized that that's how the stage was intended to make me feel. We're at a point in this project where the only parts looping are the main melodies of songs we already know. Everything else is just coming and going with varying levels of longevity. It became increasingly obvious that this was going to be the last section where we were able to remember things willingly. Post-awareness stage 4 is where serenity and the ability to recall singular memories gives way to confusion and horror. It's the beginning of an eventual process where all memories begin to become more fluid through entanglements, repetition, and rupture. This is not an enjoyable section at all. We are far past any sense of joy, fondness, or even safety at all. Songs are not only muddled together through each track, but the outside effects that contaminate each track are at a record high. There's grain, unfamiliar pads fading in and out, different sections of songs playing in both ears. The stage is a full confusion-induced nightmare. The song titles reflect this as well. I mentioned this partially in the last section, but what I didn't talk about was that each song is given a letter before the title that assigns it to a specific stage. 1 was A and B, 2 was C and D, and 3 was E and F. But this section is different. 4 contains the letters G, H, I, and J. Everything is becoming unorganized while at the same time being thrown together and misremembered. What I find really interesting about this section is that even through the confusion and fear, there are still things that can be remembered. Certain parts of songs can be picked out from the noise, and there are times where songs prominent in earlier parts of the album can be heard at a much louder volume than the noise. Usually they happen in small breaks in these 20-minute long nightmares, but the track Temporary Bliss State is just that. While still being grainy and noisy, it's much brighter and calmer than the other songs in this section. Almost a callback to some of the earlier ones. However, this is the last time we'll get breaks like this for a while. In my own personal notes, I wrote that this section was the most jarring change so far. Going from songs looping slowly in on themselves to just random jumps throughout was freaky at first. It really was a bit of a shock to listen to. This was also the first section where I could feel myself getting scared almost out of anticipation. almost like I was waiting for something loud or scary to happen, or even afraid that I'd never hear some of those peaceful moments again. Again, I realized this is how the section was supposed to make me feel. The fear of truly never remembering certain things again while actually going through the stages of intense confusion is insanely frightening. Post-awareness stage 5 is confusions and horror. More extreme entanglements, repetition, and rupture can give way to calmer moments. The unfamiliar may sound and feel familiar. Time is often spent only in the moment, leading to isolation. Stage 5 is a mess. If you thought Stage 4 was confusing, Stage 5 seems to truly have no rhyme or reason as to what is being remembered or forgotten. Everything is tangled and even more frightening than before. You can hear voices, instruments, echoes, outside noises, and everything in between, all at the same time. It's extremely overwhelming and shares the same over 20-minute long track times as the previous stage. The description mentions this being what is heard in the moments leading to isolation. According to alzheimers.org.uk, social isolation is a sign of dementia and can even lead to causing it in people who have not yet developed. Within all of the fear being felt from the entire world around you seeming unfamiliar and scary, you isolate yourself from it, leaving only you and these terrifying sounds. The main thing I want to point out is the return of these seemingly calmer breaks from the last section. I mentioned in the last stage that was going to be the last time we were going to hear breaks like that, and while technically that's not true, let me explain. This time around, these breaks don't seem nearly as comforting. Where in Stage 4 they came in the form of songs we recognized, these are unfamiliar and new. While it's still a welcome change for the noise, we don't recognize what we're hearing, no matter how badly it seems like we want to. The unfamiliar is seeming familiar. In my own personal notes, I wrote that not only did this entire section make me feel uneasy and scared, but that none of the musical payoffs felt good or earned. As I mentioned earlier, the breaks in this chaos that were previously felt like we earned are no longer memories we recognized. They're simply quiet moments that we wish we could call our original memory. Post-awareness stage 6 is without description. And that is the best way to describe it. From the very end of stage 5 and through the entirety of stage 6, there is almost nothing. No loud sounds, no chaotic echoing, no looping, just static. At times you can hear the occasional groan and grind throughout the track, and even sometimes the faintest remembrance of a past melody, but the rest is nowhere to be found. That is until the very last song. In this last song, the final moments of the album, music can be heard. The sounds we were used to from earlier in the album have returned in some form, along with these almost angelic pads to go with it. For around 5 minutes, the song can be heard, until you reach the last minute of the song. Where it's complete silence. No grain, no sounds, nothing. Signifying the end of the journey, the defeat. This was the hardest section for me to listen to. Imagining myself in this state of just pure nothingness was heartbreaking. That feeling was also supplemented by the stage's album cover. I haven't talked about the covers of the stages yet on purpose because I wanted to focus specifically on this one. All of the covers are real pieces by Ivan Seal. The Stage 6 cover depicts a canvas, but we're only able to see the back of it. To me, this represents the life we lived, or the person we were, painted on this canvas. But at this point in our lives, the contents are completely hidden from us. We're left in a state of nothingness, a beige back of a canvas. As I mentioned earlier in this video, portions of this project have been around for almost 10 years. Time can prove to be music's best friend or worst enemy, and it's usually hard to tell whether an album will age well as time goes on. But for Everywhere at the End of Time, I feel like it has done that. For an album about the horrors of a disease that makes it feel like you've lost all the time you've had, I feel like it's just as important today as it was when it released. To this day, dementia is still one of the most misunderstood diseases. Even now, it's sometimes viewed as just a normal part of getting older, or even just a disease that makes you forget things more easily. It's these things and many other misconceptions that cause around 3 in 5 people affected by dementia to have too little support in their time of need. To me, this is one of the reasons the album is so important. It not only gave people a lens into how it might look to be affected by the disease, but it did 2 more things really well. For one, it struck a young audience. During the pandemic, the album became famous on TikTok and was turned into some sort of challenge. This article by the New York Times writes it really well. People were challenging each other to listen to the entire album, oftentimes in one sitting, and share their thoughts afterwards. This started causing the younger audience to feel a newfound sense of connection and empathy to a disease that they previously were unable to conceptualize. Connecting with an audience you didn't intend to connect with can sometimes be one of the greatest accomplishments in music. But secondly, it was able to convey how important music is for patients affected by dementia. While the album was using music more as an all-encompassing metaphor for the disease itself, it showed how music can be one of the most lasting and longest remaining memories for people affected by dementia. The best and most beautiful example of this I can mention comes in the form of a man named Chandler Durango and his late grandmother. Chandler created a TikTok account back in 2021 and started cataloging his visits with his grandmother, who was living through the effects of dementia. One of the most noticeable things in these visits, especially the ones from this year as the disease progressed, was how even though his grandmother had trouble remembering most things and needed assistance doing regular tasks, she always remembered a handful of songs that Chandler would sing to her. This would become one of their main forms of bonding and connection, singing old hymns and songs from throughout her lifetime. The part of the brain that is involved in musical memory is usually less affected by diseases like Alzheimer's, and is one of the reasons why people affected can remember music more easily. I had reached out to Chandler in appreciation and for permission to show one of these videos, but I did not receive a response back. Even though I can't show the videos here, I highly recommend you go check out Chandler's page on TikTok. He is truly one of the most amazing people I had come across this year, and did such a good job at giving people a glimpse of something they may not have known much about. His page will be linked in the description. I truly think that this album has stood the test of time, not just sonically, but thematically. Everywhere at the End of Time is still a terrifyingly amazing look into the mind of someone affected by dementia, and there are still signs of this today. Welcome back to the recording studio. Now, this section of the video is going to be my own personal thoughts of the album as it pertains to my own life. So that means the actual research part is over if you don't want to hear the sappy and real stuff. I guess I understand. I'll only be a little bit sad. But this album really struck something in me, especially upon re-listen as someone who grew up with a close relative with dementia. And so I would just like to share. When I was around 5 or 6 years old, my grandmother on my dad's side was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. Being as I was that young and a lot of my memories of my extended family are from my mom's side, my memories now of her aren't the clearest, but there are a lot I still do remember. Both of my parents' extended family lived in Oklahoma City, and so whenever we would visit when I was a kid, we would always go out to lunch with my grandmother and grandfather on my dad's side, at least once. We would always go to the same restaurant, a place called Johnny's Burgers, and my grandparents would always be wearing pretty much the same thing. They always dressed somewhat formally. Even my grandmother had a dress shirt and dress pants on. My grandmother would always order a Caesar salad burger, which sounds weird, but it is really good, I promise, and would ask us the same questions about our lives every single time. I didn't realize how important these lunches were to her at the time, and how I guess they were a source of stability for her. But as time went on, they would become less frequent, and my dad would tell us that she was getting sick. During this period, because I was so young, it was almost impossible to imagine what she was going through, but I could see how it affected other people, especially my dad. My dad is the strongest person I know, and around me and my siblings, he would never show that anything was wrong, but there would be times where my grandfather would call, and he would have to make a quick trip to Oklahoma City randomly in the middle of the night. He would sometimes have to leave work to go, and there were times where we were already visiting OKC, or he'd have to stay later to try and visit her, but he would never let us know how it was affecting him. He always told us that she was okay, and even after she passed, he told us that she was at peace. To me, that's what made listening to this album the hardest. I think being that young at the time and not being able to imagine what that was like, and now listening to this at my grown age and being able to conceptualize all these feelings, it filled me with this really big sense of dread that I can't put into words. Knowing someone in my family experienced this and remembering how it affected everybody made this journey a lot more difficult to go on. But I think more importantly, it left me thankful that the album did exist. It really proves to be kind of one of the best aids to people to understand this like unknown evil. Another just really good reason on why this behemoth of a project has stood the test of time, and why, in my opinion, I think it will continue to do so. And I mean, that's kind of all the thoughts I have on the album. I mentioned this earlier in the video, but I don't think I listened to this album in full since like freshman year of high school. So kind of re-going on this journey was a very interesting experience. I hope that I covered the album well. I hope I did it justice. I hope I treated it with the respect that it deserves. And I hope that you learned something and you had a good time watching. This video is very different from the ones I usually make. I usually am sitting in front of a camera, in front of a green screen, talking about artists and albums that I like, and I'm going to continue doing that. But a part of making this video was for practice, so I could try this new editing style. So if you enjoyed it, let me know so I don't think I failed. But I really do appreciate you watching. So thank you so much. I will see you next week. Goodbye.